The rain in Manhattan didn't fall softly that morning. It lashed against glass towers like a test from heaven. On the 42nd floor of Lexington Heights, Ethan Miles, 24, heir to Miles Enterprises, watched the city drown below him. His suit was perfect. His heart, anything but. He'd grown up around boardrooms and private jets. But lately, none of it felt like his life. The numbers, the meetings, the fake smiles, it was all noise. Across the street, through the rain-slick window, he saw a small coffee cart on the corner. The barista inside, a young woman with auburn hair tied messily under a cap, was laughing with a drenched customer, offering a napkin instead of change. There was something real about her. Her name was Lena Carter, 22, working double shifts to help her mother pay rent in a small apartment in Queens. Every morning, no matter how cold or wet, she served the city its caffeine with a smile that defied exhaustion. When Ethan's car service broke down that morning, a rarity in his sheltered world, he decided, for once, to walk. He stopped at her cart, hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. Just a black coffee," he said. She smiled. "Rough morning too, huh?" He chuckled softly. "Something like that. $5." He reached instinctively for his card, but the reader blinked out. Dead battery. Lena grinned. "You can pay tomorrow if you're planning to survive New York that long." He laughed, a little too genuinely. "I'll be back." When he walked away, the coffee burned his hand, but the warmth wasn't from the cup. That evening, he mentioned the encounter to his father, Richard Miles, a towering figure of wealth and precision, CEO, billionaire, a man who'd built his empire from concrete and control. Richard didn't even look up from his tablet. "Son, you're supposed to be networking, not chatting up baristas. The Miles legacy isn't built on street coffee." Ethan's jaw tightened. Maybe that's why it feels empty. His father's eyes finally lifted, sharp as glass. "Empty is what you'll be if you forget who you are." But the next morning, Ethan returned to that cart anyway. Over the next few weeks, coffee became conversation, and conversation became something deeper. Lena wasn't impressed by his watch or last name. She didn't even know them. One evening, as dusk painted the city gold, she told him, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" He nodded, quietly. Every day, by the end of the month, he'd stopped wearing suits to see her. He started sketching, something he hadn't done since college. On napkins she'd hand him with his coffee. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One afternoon, a black Mercedes pulled up beside the cart. Richard Miles stepped out, raincoat pristine, face unreadable. "Lena Carter?" he asked coolly. "I believe you know my son." She froze, glancing between the two. Ethan's face went pale. "Dad." Richard's tone was icy calm. "Ethan, get in the car." "Sir, he didn't do anything wrong," Lena stammered. Richard's gaze lingered on her. Not cruel, but dissecting. "Young lady, I appreciate your kindness, but my son's future doesn't belong here." The car door slammed. Rain poured harder. Ethan stood in the street, torn between two worlds, privilege and truth. He took one step toward Lena, then another. "Dad, I'm staying." The silence that followed cut sharper than thunder. The next few days turned into a quiet storm. Ethan moved out of the penthouse, not in anger, but in search of air. He rented a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, worked at a local art studio, and started saving for the first time in his life. He didn't tell Lena who he really was. She only knew him as Ethan Walker, an aspiring designer trying to make it in the city. They built something small but real, late-night pizza slices, Central Park walks, shared laughter over bills and dreams. But secrets have gravity. One morning, Lena showed him a flyer, Miles Enterprises art grant for emerging designers. Her eyes sparkled. "You should apply. You're incredible, Ethan." He froze. "That's not really my thing." "Come on. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst was already happening. He was lying to the one person who saw him for who he truly was. Meanwhile, back in the glass towers of Manhattan, Richard Miles wasn't done testing him. He'd ordered his assistant to keep tabs on Ethan. What he saw, his son cleaning brushes, eating from food trucks, sketching until dawn, was unrecognizable. Yet something in Richard shifted. He'd built everything from control. His son was rebuilding himself through choice. Weeks later, the Miles Enterprises annual gala glittered across the city, a cathedral of wealth. And in a twist of fate, Lena was hired to serve coffee at the event. catering part-time to make rent. She nearly dropped the tray when she saw Ethan in a tuxedo at the front table, standing beside Richard Miles. Her voice trembled. "Ethan, what is this?" The music faded around them. Cameras flashed. Eyes turned. Ethan stepped forward. "Lena, I never meant to lie. I just wanted to know what it felt like to be seen for me. Not the money, not the name." Her eyes glistened, betrayal cutting deeper than anger. "You could have trusted me." Richard intervened, calm but sharp. "You see now, Miss Carter, why worlds like ours don't mix." The words hung heavy. The room was silent. Lena turned away, setting the tray down slowly. "Maybe they don't mix because people like you keep them apart." She walked out. The door's echo was louder than the applause that followed. Ethan's chest tightened. The air felt suffocating that he left the gala too. Ignoring the murmurs, the judgment, the shame, rain met him again outside. He stood alone in it, tie loosened, city spinning. For the first time, he had nothing, and it felt honest. Days turned to weeks. Lena never answered his calls. Richard assumed the lesson was learned. But Ethan wasn't defeated. He was rebuilding that. He started an art initiative called Canvas Streets, giving free workshops to underprivileged kids. Funding it with his savings and small donations that he painted with them, taught them, listened, and one afternoon, as the kids drew city skylines on cardboard, a familiar voice whispered behind him, "You really did it, huh?" He turned. Lena stood there, older somehow, steadier. She'd seen an ad for the program online. He smiled softly. "Guess I passed my own test." She folded her arms, half smiling. "You always had the answers." He looked at her, eyes tired but bright. "Not this time. I just learned where to look for them." They talked until the sun dipped low, laughter echoing between murals. But before anything could heal, another shadow loomed. Richard Miles had come to see the project himself. The old man stood at the edge of the playground, watching his son teach a group of kids how to paint sunlight onto gray walls. No cameras, no suits, no press, just humanity. When Ethan noticed him, silence spread through the park. Richard stepped forward slowly, shoes sinking into damp grass. "So this is where you've been?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it's real here." Richard's eyes swept across the paintings, crude, beautiful depictions of hope and home. He picked up a canvas of a city skyline drawn by a child and turned it over. On the back, a scribbled note read, "Mr. Ethan says every building starts with a single line." For the first time in years, Richard's expression softened as he walked closer. "You gave them something money can't buy." Ethan replied quietly, "That's what you taught me. You just didn't know it." Lena watched from a distance. Hesitant, Richard noticed her and gestured her closer. "Miss Carter," he began, voice measured. "I owe you an apology." She blinked. "You don't owe me anything, sir." He shook his head. "I judged you by your shoes, not your soul. That's not the man I wanted my son to become, or the man I thought I was." The words hung there, honest, heavy, freeing. That he turned to Ethan. "If this is what you want, if this is who you are, then build it. I'll back every dollar of it." Ethan hesitated. "On one condition. The project stays free. No corporate names. No ownership." Richard smiled faintly, the way a man does when he finally sees his reflection clearly. "Deal." Lena stepped closer, voice trembling but warm. "Looks like your test went both ways." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, guess we all passed in our own way." As the sun set, the kids gathered for a group photo, brushes raised. Paint splattered, smiles everywhere. Lena slipped her hand into Ethan's, and for once, it didn't feel like two worlds colliding. It felt like one being built anew. The final shot, the city skyline reflected in a puddle of paint water, rippling softly, rich and poor blending into color. Moral: true love doesn't bridge worlds. It builds a new one where both can belong.